1 year ago, Hamas carried out barbaric acts on Israel's soil and took 97 people as hostages. This has led to one of the most inhuman bloodshed in world history. 17,000 children are dead, more than 24,000 other people have died. Historically, the region has been a witness to deep and profound hostilities. But this time around, the conflict has assumed dangerous proportions for the entire world. I have invited Dr. Kinshuk Chatterjee, one of the most distinguished experts on the region, to help us make sense of the situation. Welcome to The Matrix.
Thank you.
Anger and hatred and the struggle for supremacy in the region has numbed human minds. In the race of one-upmanship, people have stopped thinking clearly. Entire humanity is watching helplessly, and there is concern that the conflict would magnify and involve active participation of superpowers. Kinshuk Chatterjee is a professor of history in Calcutta University. He is a world-renowned expert on West Asia. Welcome to the show, Kinshuk.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time. The first question I would like to ask you is, where do you think this conflict is going?
It is almost iffy. It can go towards conflict, or maybe the region will pull back from the brink. But it is very unlikely that Israeli incursion into Lebanon is going to die out just like that. Israel has started fighting on two fronts, so that it's very difficult to see it coming to an end anytime in the near future.
Yes, now that Iran is directly involved in the conflict, what could be its game plan? Israel has been successful in ensuring that it doesn't remain in backstage anymore.
Iran is yet to be fully engaged in the war because the telegraphing, as they say, the message is that Israel has drawn first blood, but Iran is not yet ready to get into the conflict, because had it not been the case, then the missiles wouldn't have been preceded by a 12-hour warning. It loses them the element of surprise. So it is a kind of coded messaging that we are striking, but we do not want a full-fledged war just yet.
Yes, now that Israel is on an all-out mission to decimate all its adversaries, but it has not been able to achieve a decisive victory anywhere. Israeli forces are already worn out due to long campaign in Gaza. It has not been able to achieve its objectives on the ground in all three theaters. It has opened Palestine, Lebanon, and Iran. How long and how far can it go?
You need to understand this thing, that the declared objectives are whatever the government has said. But the real issue is when in April Iran launched those missiles at Israel, along with those from the Hamas, from the Hezbollah and the Houthis, the one thing that happened was this is the first time since 1973 that there was actually some kind of direct confrontation where the airspace of Israel was violated. So Israeli defense policy is now being rewritten. For all these years, for the almost last 40 years, Israel was moving with a kind of perception of military superiority that no regional power would dare to take it on fully frontally. By striking with those missiles and forcing Israel to reach to sort of hit back with Iron Dome, and even then with US, UK and Jordanian assistance, it became very clear that Iran has the strike capability. So the Israeli policy of deterrence through military superiority, that is virtually off the table right now. As a result, there are two positions within the Israeli defense establishment. One is that we are not likely to win a full frontal confrontation, especially with the Gaza situation still unraveling. So we should pull back and sort of take stock. The other one is that Iran's defense military capabilities are now so considerable that, and there is a good possibility that Iran is only 3 weeks away or 4 weeks away from nuclear capability, and then another probably 2 or 3 months before Iran develops the delivery capability. After that, Iran would be totally out of reach, according to this section of the Israeli strategic establishment. And therefore, they are now saying that we must strike Iran while we can and maybe slow down their progression. Similarly, there is this other argument that's the manner in which the Gaza conflict has triggered resistance from the region. For Israel, this is not a resistance. This is basically a strike which is posing existential questions, meaning Israel's entire defensive apparatus is now being thrown before a challenge which it had not anticipated till now. So Israel is using the idea of offense is the best defense, and then sort of impeding the strike capabilities of all Israel's allies, all Israel's enemies. This is a very ambitious task, which is the reason why it is being prefaced with different kind of war objectives. Those are declared, those are official objectives according to the Israeli government. But the Israeli defense establishment is moving with an entirely different game plan. Their idea is to reduce the strike capabilities of their various adversaries to a point where they do not pose any existential threat. So what is officially declared and what looks like being the strategic objective that they want to reach is that difference has to be understood. And in this light, the very fact that Iran has struck Israel and this time round actually reached Israeli ground, Iranian missiles have gone through Israeli defense shield, makes it even more imperative that Israel tries to reduce Iran's strike capabilities, which is not a very easy thing. If there was to be a full-on frontal confrontation, it's very difficult which direction it would go, but chances are Israel would prevail if it was only a one-on-one between Iran and Israel. That is the reason why neither side are looking at a direct confrontation or a full-fledged war, but I have a suspicion that this slide will continue in the direction of war.
So do you think that Israel's strategy as far, is it working in their favor in the region?
In the region, of course not, but Israel is right now not in a position where it would think of the region. Mm-hmm. Its principal purpose is to bring back that aura of military superiority, without which Israel's security is very severely compromised. Because had diplomatic understanding with her neighbors been there, this wouldn't have posed such a big problem. But because Israel is immensely unpopular because of the regime it has set up, almost like an ethnocracy, as Israeli scholars themselves keep on saying, and the Gaza thing, remember the Gaza thing, it has just sort of gone back on somewhere in the inside pages of the newspaper. But the confrontation is not over. The problem is not yet resolved. You have 7 million Jewish Israelis and you have 7 million Arab Israelis and Palestinians, and the equation between the two is not a bit better. In the last year of the war, the situation has dramatically deteriorated. So with the Gaza problem being where it is, the regional milieu is absolutely unsuitable for Israel. So Israel is in a very tight corner. If you just go by the measurement of the hardware, yes, of course, Israel is leagues ahead of any of our neighbors. But how long, as you very correctly said, the Israeli army is now overstretched. It is tired after 1 year of conflict. And if you look at it that way, if this was to become a regional war, then the war has just begun. So it is not in the best interests of even Israel to follow the forward policy with the gusto that they're doing right now.
Right. And if the war is prolonged in the region, do you think that Iran, Palestine and Lebanon could withstand Israel's superior defense capability, the technology which they have displayed?
We are too much in awe with technology to understand that all Iran, Hezbollah and Hamas have to do is to survive. Simply by being there, the threat remains alive for Israel. And it is and because of the nature of that thing, extinction of the threat altogether. Look at the way Israel is proceeding. It is targeting, it is going for targets that are normally considered off limits. So you have hospitals being targeted, schools being targeted, completely civilian neighborhoods being targeted by simply saying that there is Hamas underneath or there is Hezbollah somewhere in the buildings and stuff like that. Mosques are being targeted, and Today, in fact, six Lebanese hospitals have begun to cease operations because of the barrage they're facing. Now, Israel does not have the burden of proof. It does not have to prove the case that they are there. Any of the terrorist organizations are there hiding. And even if they were, does it justify killing several times more innocent civilians than the number of casualties are being sort of chalked up against any of the terrorist organizations? So the manner in which Israel is moving, they might break down, they might dismantle, they might extinguish the terrorist infrastructure, as they keep on calling, of the Hamas and Hezbollah. But how do they take out the fight from people, innocent people who have suffered? So as the Israelis themselves say, they are not going to be able to kill the idea of Hamas or the idea of Hezbollah. They are simply trying to reduce the military impact of the institutions that they are now targeting.
Yes, and history has shown that the policy of neutralizing the leaders of these groups have not really worked, because there's always another leader who takes over. But now, US is like a big brother for Israel, and it has been reinforcing Israel's defense capabilities in the region. But if Iran raises the stakes, what could be the role of US, Russia and China in this entire conflict?
Let's get this thing very clear. It is not in the interest of the United States that this conflict broadens, because right now, United States, had it not been this, had not been for the case of the Gaza conflict, United States would have been fully focused on the Ukraine question. Now, if this goes also out of hand in an election year, if this was to happen between now and November, the United States would automatically move in defense of Israel. Although I do not consider that possibility very highly, that the conflict would break out. If it does, it is very difficult to see how the United States is going to sit this one out. Maybe they will not put boots on the ground. Maybe they will not even fly sorties. But they will certainly keep supplying the ammunition, which are automatically meant to be supplied with the stopped from being supplied with any conflict breaking out. So the United States is trying its best to not have Israel move in. So there were, in the last 2 days, United States has basically cautioned Israel against striking out either the nuclear facilities of Iran or the oil facilities. The nuclear facilities, you can understand. Why stop disrupting the flow of oil? Simply because it would sort of impact on global prices, including the American people. And that is something they would want to avoid in an election year. I have a suspicion they would generally want to avoid. But more importantly, if another theater of conflict broadens, sort of comes up, where the United States is expected to intervene or required to intervene, it would stretch United States forces even further. And there is already this discussion going on that if the United States does not actually put boots on the ground in Ukraine, does not put boots on the ground in the Middle East, is there a possibility that China might decide that this is a good time to move on to Taiwan, because the United States would never put boots on the ground? So this is a point where the United States does not want the narrative to turn. So it is in the American interests to keep out of the conflict and, if possible, to preempt it. The only problem is we overestimate American influence on Israeli politics. The Americans have been cautioning Israel against the track they have taken right from October last. And the Israeli political establishment is divided, as we know, between the hard right and the normal Likud kind of power forces in the Israeli politics. Believe it or not, Netanyahu, despite the bad press he gets deservedly, is probably a voice of moderation. But he is trying to balance the equation between the hard right in his establishment and the forces that are drawing him back, including the Americans. Nobody wants a regional war, each for their own interest, not for the love of Palestinians, not for the love of innocent lives being lost in Beirut, but simply for the regional geopolitical repercussions.
India's had friendly relations with Israel, Iran, Palestine and Lebanon. Given that all our friends are fighting amongst themselves, this equation puts us in a very difficult situation. What would be your advice for India, as far as its policy is concerned to deal with the situation?
I think the government of India is right now holding the right line, as we historically have done, that if you have friends on both sides in a conflict, then you do not intervene. You could certainly send humanitarian support, but then that endangers your own people. So that is sort of open for debate. You can do that or you may not. But the other thing that the government of India seems to be doing is talking to both sides behind the scenes. And you never know where the breakthrough comes.
Right.
And yeah.
Yes, please complete.
No, so where the breakthrough comes, you don't know. A reliable via media, an honest broker is always useful. And since India has sort of goodwill, vast reserves of goodwill, even among the Palestinians, it makes sense for India to be diplomatically proactive.
Right, like we have already initiated this peace efforts as far as Russia and Ukraine is concerned. But now, in this conflict, the Arab world is also doing a tightrope.
Yeah.
But the public opinion is now tilting in favor of Palestine. In such a situation, the governments are under tremendous pressure to act. Do you think that the governments will take any major decisions under pressure from the public opinion?
None of the Arab governments of the Middle East are in any position to confront Israel militarily. So the only intervention worth its name could be diplomatic, which the Arab world is fully engaged in its own way. The only point of concern that they have is that while they do not want the Palestinians butchered in the manner in which they are now being butchered, if Iran intervenes, as everybody fears that they might, then the Arab street may be in favor of the Palestinian conflict, but the Arab neighbors would not want Iran emboldened by a successful intervention in this conflict. Meaning, I'm not saying that the chances of success for Iran are very high, but if Iran does become successful, that would be too much for the Arab capitals to risk. So it is very delicately poised. There is an outside possibility of this small flashpoint becoming a large regional war, and in that case, all bets would be off.
Right. Now, the stock markets are already hit, and there is a grave concern that any more escalation in the situation may adversely affect world trade. India would be no exception to this. What are your comments?
No, well, actually, we are not noticing these things all the time because they do not impact readily or visibly in our daily lives. But commodity prices, both in Europe and India, are rising simply because the sea route that we normally took through the Suez, this has become very costly because of high insurance premiums being asked on account of Houthi activities. If this breaks out into a full range war, oil is not the only thing that is of issue, but even oil could be affected. The flow of oil through the Straits of Hormuz would be one of the first things that Iran would like to disrupt in order to sort of bring the world's attention to this thing and get a negotiated settlement first. And as a result, the global oil prices rising high would certainly not be in the interest of the Indian domestic market. It just might help India's oil exports to Europe, but that's a very long story. The chances of profiting there in a far greater volume is considerably less.
Kingshuk, thank you so much for being with
Thanks
us.
for having me.
In spite of your busy schedule in Delhi, thank you very much.
Thank you.
As a nation which has always believed in the principles of peace and non-alliance, India has been appealing to warring nations to be at peace. We hope good sense will prevail, and that will be in the interest of everybody. That's all we have this week. We'll be back soon with another interesting topic. Till then, goodbye from the Matrix team.